Alarms screamed in the underground lab, red lights pulsing against steel walls. Ethan Cross gasped for air, veins glowing like molten glass beneath fragile skin. Dr. Adrian Carter said, "We pushed too far." His trembling hands clutched, burning files, the pages curling into black ash. Monitors flickered with distorted brain scans, each one a jagged wave of chaos. A technician collapsed, clutching his chest as smoke hissed from ruptured wires. Sarah Miller said, "Shut it down now." Her voice cracked under fear. Ethan's scream turned guttural, not human, as restraint strained against bone. The stench of chemicals mixed with fire, choking everyone. Carter whispered, "Genius was promised, but madness is all we carve." Darkness swallowed the room as sparks rained down, and silence fell too quickly, too heavy, as if the experiment itself had stolen the air. The silence pressed heavier than the alarms. Dr. Carter leaned on a console, chest heaving, ash streaking his coat. He muttered, "We should never have tested on him." Sarah Miller wiped soot from her face, trembling. "You said he volunteered." Carter's lips twisted, his guilt choking him. Ethan Cross lay limp, but his chest still rose faintly, shallow breaths scraping the air. Sparks hissed across the wet floor, crackling near his restrained body. The technician's corpse smoked faintly, the acrid stench unbearable. Sarah whispered, "This wasn't genius, this was slaughter." Shadows stretched unnaturally across the lab walls, moving without cause. Carter shivered, staring into the dark corners, voice breaking. Something stayed behind. His words made the silence unbearable, as though the lab itself listened. Sarah's voice quivered. "If he wakes again, he won't be human." Carter avoided her gaze, hands trembling over blood-smeared console buttons. He whispered, "Humanity was never the goal." Sparks dimmed, leaving the lab in suffocating half-darkness. Ethan stirred faintly, lips twitching, a sound like static breaking through his teeth. Sarah flinched, clutching a bent clipboard, as if it were a weapon. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the steel walls. Carter froze, whispering, "He's resonating with the system." Fear spread in Sarah's eyes, her voice cracking. "Then we shut it down before it consumes us." The hum deepened, machines flickering back to life, responding not to commands but to Ethan's breathing. The hum grew louder, making steel panels vibrate. Carter pressed buttons, but controls sparked uselessly. He muttered, "He's overriding us." Sarah's hands shook as she backed toward the exit, voice strained. "Then we end it now." Ethan's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with molten orange veins. His breath came in ragged bursts, each exhale bending the lab lights unnaturally. Sarah screamed, "He's still changing." The dead technician twitched, a final reflex adding to the terror. Carter clutched his head, whispering, "It's feeding on everything electrical." The hum turned into a distorted voice, echoes of pain and fury layered as one. Sarah slammed the emergency switch, but nothing responded, the system enslaved by Ethan's pulse. Darkness surged as lights shattered, glass raining across consoles. Sarah ducked, arms shielding her head. Carter stumbled, bleeding from a cut across his forehead. Ethan growled, voice layered with static, "Free me." The restraint snapped, metal twisting like soft clay. Sarah cried, "He's not stable." Ethan's eyes glowed brighter, veins expanding across chest and arms. The machines pulsed like a heartbeat, responding to him. Carter stepped forward weakly, whispering, "You were never meant to live this way." Ethan's scream shook the air, shattering nearby glass panels. Sparks lit the room like lightning, as the lab drowned in chaos, leaving only fear and the certainty that nothing would contain him now. The hum faded, leaving the lab shrouded in smoke and silence. Sarah Miller knelt beside the technician's body, hands shaking as she closed his eyes. She whispered, "He didn't deserve this." Dr. Adrian Carter pressed against the console, blood dripping from his forehead, guilt etched across his face. He said, "None of them did." The subject sat slumped in the chair, barely breathing, but the glow in his veins still pulsed faintly. Sarah stood, her voice trembling. You swore this would change the world. Carter's lips curled into a bitter smile. It has. Only into something monstrous. The overhead sprinklers hissed water onto sparks, the smell of burnt circuits filling the air. Sarah's eyes burned with tears, her fists tightening. Then we bury it before it buries us. The corridor beyond the lab was dim, its steel walls dripping with condensation. Sarah staggered out, coughing, her voice hoarse. We can't stay here. Carter followed slowly, dragging a bloodied hand along the wall for balance. He muttered, "If he escapes, there's nowhere safe." Sarah turned sharply, eyes blazing. "You made him, Adrian." His silence was heavier than denial, guilt carved into every line of his face. They moved past shattered glass panels, their footsteps echoing through the hollow facility. Faint whispers seemed to trail them, a chorus of voices leaking from the vents. Sarah gripped her arms tightly, shivering. How many died down here? Carter exhaled shakily, whispering, "Too many to name." The sound of distant metal creaking made them both freeze. They reached a small observation room lined with cracked, one-way mirrors. Sarah stopped, staring at the shattered glass. Behind the fractures, faint outlines of restrained figures lingered in her memory. "You kept them here," she said, voice breaking. Carter's hands shook as he steadied himself against the console, eyes glassy. "They were volunteers," he muttered, but the lie rang hollow. Sarah's voice rose with fury. "You turned them into experiments, not people." Carter clenched his jaw, the guilt suffocating him. The subject's reflection flickered in the broken glass, though he was still in the lab, his presence haunting them. Sarah backed away from the mirror, whispering, "It doesn't end with him, does it?" Carter's silence was answer enough. Sarah leaned against the cold wall, breath ragged. "I thought you wanted to cure diseases, Adrian." Carter lowered his head, voice trembling. "I wanted to cure death itself." The words hung heavy, more confession than ambition. Sarah shook her head, anger flaring. "And instead you created nightmares." Her voice cracked, weighted with grief. The faint sound of a child's laughter echoed through the corridor, making Sarah's skin crawl. She whispered, "Tell me it wasn't children." Carter's face twisted with anguish. "We started with soldiers then. Others. It was never supposed to be them." Sarah turned away, covering her mouth in horror. The laughter faded, leaving silence more suffocating than noise. Carter whispered, "I can't undo it." Sarah's steps echoed as she stormed deeper into the facility, her rage burning hotter than fear. "You lied to everyone," she shouted. Carter followed slowly, his voice hollow. "I lied to myself most of all." They entered a chamber, lined with empty restraint chairs, straps hanging loose like abandoned nooses. Sarah froze, hands trembling as she touched one of the cold restraints. How many sat here before him? Carter stared at the floor, unable to speak. The silence screamed louder than any words. Sarah whispered, "Every chair is a grave." Her tears fell silently, mixing with the water dripping from pipes overhead. Carter finally said, "Their deaths won't matter if we stop what comes next." Sarah turned, eyes burning with fury. "Then we finish it." The chamber doors screeched open, echoing like a scream, as Sarah shoved them wide. The corridor beyond was littered with scattered files, blood smudges streaking the pages. She bent quickly, snatching one, flipping through trembling hands. Her breath caught hard. "These aren't soldiers. They're civilians." Faces stared back from photos. Ordinary people, young and old, their eyes wide in fear. Carter's color drained as he ripped the file from her, clutching it desperately. He muttered, "They volunteered." Sarah's fury burst. "Their signatures are forged. Their names stolen." The words thundered through the hall. Carter clutched the folder to his chest like armor, eyes darting. "You don't understand what's at stake." Sarah stepped closer, jaw tight. "I understand you lied to everyone." A metallic thud echoed down the corridor, followed by another, like footsteps too heavy for flesh. The sound grew closer, deliberate. Sarah froze, breath sharp. He's not the only one awake. Sarah ripped another file open, photos spilling into her lap. Children, no older than 10, strapped into chairs with electrodes clamped to their skulls. Her stomach twisted violently, tears rising. Her voice broke. These weren't volunteers. Carter grabbed her arm, desperate. Listen, if we don't contain this, the world ends. She tore free, eyes ablaze. You ended their world already. The corridor lights flickered violently, sparks dripping from broken wires, casting jagged shadows. The hum returned, vibrating through the walls, rattling bolts loose. Carter's whisper trembled. He's drawing strength again. Sarah clutched the file against her chest, using it like a shield, voice cracking. Or maybe he's calling the others. A shrill scraping echoed, metal dragged across steel, closer with every second. The air grew colder, pressing against their lungs. They both turned toward the sound, fear crawling across their faces. Something unseen was moving deliberately toward them. They stumbled into a chamber where shattered glass tanks lined the walls. Thick, rancid liquid seeped across the floor, pooling around their boots. Sarah gagged, hand covering her nose, eyes darting to the half-dissolved bodies slumped inside cracked cylinders. "What is this place?" she whispered, voice shaking. Carter's face hardened, though his voice trembled. Not all of them were failures. Sarah snapped her gaze to him, horror flooding her. "You experimented on civilians, on children, on anyone you could take." Carter's hand slammed the console, sparks crackling beneath his palm. "I was saving them from death itself." His words echoed, hollow, drowned by the stench of rot. Sarah's voice trembled, but rose sharp. "You were playing God." A skeletal hand pressed against a cracked glass tank, sliding down slowly, the sound screeching. Sarah stumbled back, whispering, "They're not gone." The chamber rumbled faintly, liquid rippling as though something stirred beneath. The cracked tank shattered, liquid gushing onto the steel floor. A figure collapsed out, malformed, skin stretched over bone, veins glowing orange beneath translucent flesh. Sarah shrieked, stumbling back, slipping against wet tiles. Carter's eyes widened, not with terror but with grim awe. "It survived," he whispered, trembling. The creature convulsed violently before staggering upright, drool mixed with green fluid spilling from its mouth. Sarah shouted, voice cracking, "This is your cure for death?" The figure's head twitched, glowing eyes flicking between them. A broken, distorted hiss clawed out of its throat. "Why? Did you leave us?" Sarah froze, horror slicing deeper. Carter's lips quivered. "They remember." The sound of shifting glass filled the air as other tanks groaned, pressure building. Shadows of more bodies shifted faintly inside, their forms twitching in unnatural rhythm. The room smelled of chemical rot and copper blood, suffocating them both. The chamber rattled violently as more tanks fractured, cracks spider-webbing across thick glass. Liquid gushed in streams, filling the floor ankle-deep. Sarah grabbed Carter's sleeve, yanking hard. "We have to run." Carter's body resisted, his eyes locked on the staggering creature. "No," he whispered, voice raw. "I need to end this myself." The figure stumbled closer, its glowing veins flaring with each word. "You promised salvation." Sarah's voice cracked, louder with panic. "They're not promises, they're graves." Another tank shattered, the sound piercing, as shadows writhed inside. Dozens of voices rose together, echoing in broken, overlapping tone. "We remember." The words layered like a curse, reverberating through steel walls. Sarah pulled Carter toward the door with all her strength. His face, pale with guilt, finally gave way. They staggered into the hall as behind them, dark silhouettes dragged themselves from fractured tanks, filling the chamber with dripping footsteps. Sarah dragged Carter down a dim service tunnel, her breath ragged with panic. Pipes hissed overhead, dripping condensation that echoed like ticking clocks. Carter stumbled, whispering, "We can't outrun them." Sarah snapped, "We're not outrunning, we're exposing." She shoved him against the wall, her fury boiling over. How many more lies do I need to rip out of you? His voice shook. The project wasn't mine alone. There are others, above me. Powerful men who want this finished. Sarah's stomach sank, realization cutting deep. You mean it never ends? A voice slithered through the corridor speakers, smooth and deliberate. She's right, Adrian. You were never in control. Sarah froze, eyes darting upward. Carter's face drained of color. The voice belonged to someone alive, someone still running the experiment. The voice continued through the speakers, calm and commanding. You were useful, Adrian, until weakness made you dangerous. Sarah glared upward, shouting, Who are you? The voice chuckled low. Someone who finishes what others fear. Carter clutched his head, whispering, He's here. He never left. Sarah stepped closer, jaw tight. You've been protecting them, haven't you? Carter's silence was answer enough. Her stomach turned, betrayal twisting sharper than fear. The voice said, Bring me the subject, and perhaps I'll let you walk free. Sarah spat at the ceiling. We're not delivering anyone. The corridor lights flickered violently, then steadied, as though the voice controlled even the air around them. Carter whispered, We're already in his cage. They entered a storage chamber stacked with metal crates, shadows stretching long under a single swaying bulb. Sarah rummaged through files scattered on a desk, her hands trembling. She found a photograph of Carter with suited men, their faces blurred out. Her voice cracked. You weren't just a scientist, you were their partner. Carter reached for the photo, voice shaking. I thought I could control it, keep it humane. Sarah's fury burned. Humane? You strapped children to chairs. Carter's lips pressed thin, words failing him. A creak echoed behind the crates, followed by soft footsteps. Sarah snapped her head toward the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows. Mark Ellis, a former whistleblower presumed dead, now gaunt and trembling, his eyes darting like prey. He rasped. They never stopped. Sarah stared at Mark, her voice trembling. You were reported dead. His cracked lips curled into a bitter smile. That's what they wanted you to think. Carter stepped forward cautiously. Mark, you should have stayed hidden. Mark's glare burned into him. And let them keep killing. Sarah's heart pounded. You knew about this? Mark nodded. I worked here. I tried to expose it. They silenced me. He pointed at Carter with a trembling hand. And he helped. Carter's face twisted in pain. I thought I could protect something bigger. Sarah's fury snapped. You protected murderers. The chamber shook faintly, as if the facility itself reacted to their argument. Mark's whisper was filled with desperation. We don't have time. The ones in the tanks aren't the worst. Mark stumbled forward, clutching Sarah's arm with urgency. Listen to me. They weren't building soldiers. They were building replacements. Sarah's breath caught, eyes narrowing. Replacements for what? His voice dropped to a rasp. For us. To erase weakness. To erase death. Carter shook his head, whispering, It wasn't supposed to be this. Mark's voice grew harsher. You knew exactly what it was. That's why they kept you alive. Sarah's world spun, betrayal and horror tearing her chest. The overhead speaker crackled again, the commanding voice returning. Bring me the subject, Sarah, or I'll unleash the legacy. Sarah's fists clenched, tears streaking her face. Then you'll have to kill me first. The chamber lights died, plunging them into suffocating blackness. The blackout smothered the chamber, leaving only faint red emergency strobes, flickering like dying heartbeats. Sarah's voice cracked in the dark. What legacy? Mark's grip on her arm tightened, his whisper sharp. You don't understand. This was never about him. Carter staggered, pressing against a crate, his breath uneven. Stop, Mark. Sarah turned sharply, heart hammering. What aren't you telling me? Mark's eyes gleamed faintly in the red light. Sarah, your name was in the files. You weren't supposed to survive. Her body stiffened, denial colliding with dread. No, I was never part of this. Carter's silence burned louder than words, guilt pulling his gaze away. Sarah's chest heaved, betrayal searing her throat. You both knew. Sarah's voice rose, breaking. Why was my name in those files? Mark's jaw clenched. Because you weren't just investigating, you were a subject. The words pierced like a blade. Carter's hand trembled as he lifted it, voice hollow. She wasn't supposed to know. Sarah's throat tightened, memories rushing back, missing hours, unexplained scars, nightmares she dismissed as dreams. Her eyes glistened with tears. You experimented on me? Carter whispered. I thought I could protect you. They wanted children, and you were... He trailed off, his guilt choking him. Sarah staggered back, fury rising hotter than terror. You destroyed lives, and you destroyed mine. The air hummed again, responding not to the subject in the lab, but to her. Sarah's knees buckled as the humming deepened, rattling every crate in the chamber. Papers swirled upward in sudden gusts. Mark stared at her, his voice breaking. It's not him, it's you. You're resonating with the system. Sarah shook her head violently, hair clinging to her sweat-soaked face. No, I'm not one of them. Carter's voice cracked. You were the control group, the one meant to prove humanity could adapt. Sarah's breath grew jagged, fury and terror clashing. You made me their proof. Her fists clenched, veins glowing faintly beneath her skin. The chamber lights surged white, bending unnaturally, as if obeying her pulse. Mark stumbled back, whispering, You're the key they've been waiting for. The overhead speakers crackled, the commanding voice returning, smoother than ever. There she is, the one we've been waiting for. Sarah gritted her teeth, shouting upward, I'm not your experiment. The voice laughed coldly. You already are. Every scar, every nightmare, they were progress. Carter stepped forward, voice breaking. Leave her alone, she's not yours anymore. The voice twisted sharper. You think you saved her, Adrian. You only delayed the inevitable. Sarah's veins glowed brighter, her chest rising with rage. Mark grabbed her shoulder, whispering, Don't let them use you. Her tears blurred with fury as she screamed, I'll burn this place down before I let you own me. The chamber's lights exploded, shards raining like glass stars. Silence followed the explosion, the chamber drowning in smoke. Sarah stood trembling, light fading from her veins. Carter limped closer, his face streaked with blood, whispering, Sarah, you were never supposed to know. She turned to him slowly, her voice a razor. You stole my life, Adrian. Mark stepped between them, his gaze fierce. You don't understand. They'll stop at nothing to reclaim her. Carter's face twisted with regret. Then I'll die stopping them. Sarah's body shook, grief and fury colliding. No, she whispered. We all die if this keeps going. The ground shuddered as voices echoed from deep below, not one, but many, chanting in unison. The legacy awakens. The chamber walls rattled violently as deep voices echoed from below, shaking the steel foundations. Sarah staggered, clutching her chest as glowing lines spread across her veins again. Mark grabbed her arm, shouting above the roar, They're feeding off you. Carter pressed against a console, voice cracking. We have to sever the link, or the entire facility becomes theirs. Sarah's tears mixed with fury. You made me the link. The floor split open, steam hissing upward, and shadowed figures climbed slowly from the depths, their bodies twisted, half human, half something else. Their chant bled through the air. Join us. Sarah screamed, her voice raw. I am not yours. The facility groaned, as though it were alive, waiting for her choice. The awakened creatures dragged themselves free, their forms grotesque, voices echoing like broken radio signals. Mark pulled Sarah behind a crate. We have to move. Carter limped forward instead, arms raised, shouting, They want me. I created them. Sarah's voice cracked. You don't get to play martyr now. One of the creatures stepped closer, orange light pulsing beneath translucent skin, eyes glowing with hatred. Father, It hissed at Carter. His face collapsed under the weight of that word, horror gripping his heart. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm, whispering, "If they take him, they'll come for me next." The creatures howled, surging toward them, their movements jerky, unnatural, like puppets tangled in their own strings. The largest creature lurched forward, its jaw dislocated, voice layered with echoes. "We were never meant to die. But you left us." Carter's eyes brimmed with tears as he whispered, "I tried to save you." Sarah shouted, rage spilling from her chest. "You tortured them." The creature raised a clawed hand, sparks rippling across the chamber, lights shattering one by one. Mark shoved Sarah to the ground as debris rained. "They're responding to you." Sarah clutched the floor, veins blazing brighter, her pulse shaking the walls. The creatures froze mid-step, their eyes locked on her like starving wolves. Carter whispered, terror and awe mingling. "They're bound to you now." Sarah's body trembled, caught between rejecting them and unleashing them fully. The air grew thick, humming like thunder trapped underground. Sarah rose slowly, her veins blazing like fire beneath her skin. The creatures bent toward her involuntarily, their bodies twitching in sync with her heartbeat. Mark backed away, whispering, "You're controlling them." Sarah shook her head, panic colliding with power. "No, I'm becoming them." Carter stumbled closer, bloodied, his voice breaking. "Sarah, listen to me. You're still human. Fight it." Her eyes shimmered with tears as the creatures snarled and writhed. "They're inside me," she whispered. The chanting grew louder, filling the chamber with one word, "Awaken." The steel walls quaked, bolts bursting free, as Sarah screamed, the sound splitting glass into dust. Sarah collapsed to her knees, her body convulsing as the creatures circled, chanting her name in distorted voices. Carter fell beside her, clutching her shoulders. "You are not them, you are my redemption." She shoved him back, her voice cracked with fury. "You are my curse." Mark shouted desperately from across the chamber. "Sarah, fight them, or they'll claim you forever." Her eyes glowed blinding orange as her scream erupted, shattering every console and bursting pipes overhead. Steam engulfed the chamber, drowning them in heat. The creatures shrieked, torn between reverence and rage, their forms warping in the blinding light. Carter whispered weakly, blood spilling from his lips, "If she chooses them, the world ends." Sarah's scream echoed like a storm shaking the earth above. The steam cleared slowly, revealing Sarah kneeling in the wreckage, her veins dimming but her body trembling with exhaustion. Carter crawled toward her, coughing blood, his voice breaking. "You're stronger than them, Sarah." She shook her head violently, tears streaking down her soot-covered face. "I can feel them inside me. They want me to finish what you started." Mark shouted from across the chamber, "Then fight them before they consume you." The creatures circled, snarling, their glowing veins pulsing in rhythm with Sarah's heartbeat. She clutched her chest, whispering, "I'm already part of them." Carter grasped her arm weakly. "Then use it, turn their power against them." Sarah staggered to her feet, her body shaking as sparks flickered around her. The creatures bowed slightly, compelled by her presence. Mark stared in awe. "They obey you." "What?" she whispered. "Not for long." Carter forced himself upright, blood dripping down his chin. "This is your chance, burn it all down." Sarah's tears streamed as her voice broke. "If I unleash it, I don't come back." Carter's eyes softened, guilt and pride colliding. "Then don't come back. End this for them." The creatures snarled, torn between reverence and rage, their distorted voices chanting, "Awaken fully." Sarah raised her trembling hands, light burning beneath her skin, her decision breaking her apart inside. The chamber roared as Sarah screamed, light erupting from her body in violent waves. The creatures convulsed, shrieking as their flesh cracked under the force. Carter stumbled forward, shielding his eyes, whispering, "She's doing it." Mark pulled him back, shouting, "She'll kill herself." Sarah's veins blazed, her skin glowing like molten glass, her voice splitting the air. "No more experiments. No more cages." The chamber floor split wider, swallowing the writhing bodies into a pit of fire and steam. The creatures clawed at the air, their chants dissolving into distorted screams. Sarah's body shook violently, blood running from her nose, but her eyes burned with defiance. She was destroying them, and herself. The floor collapsed deeper, swallowing consoles and bodies into fire. Sarah staggered at the edge, light still pouring from her veins. Carter reached out desperately. "Sarah, stop before it takes you too." She turned her head slowly, her face streaked with tears and blood. "This is the only way," Mark shouted. "There has to be another way." Sarah smiled faintly through her pain. There never was. Her scream erupted again, brighter and louder, her form cracking like glass under the force. Carter collapsed to his knees, whispering, "Forgive me." Mark shielded his face as the chamber was drowned in blinding light, the heat tearing through steel like paper. When the light finally faded, silence smothered the ruins. The chamber was gone, swallowed into a pit of molten rubble. Carter crawled forward weakly, whispering Sarah's name. Only ash and cracked steel remained. Mark stood behind him, voice hollow. "She chose for all of us." Carter's face broke with grief, but his whisper was filled with awe. "She saved them." The overhead speakers crackled faintly, the antagonist's voice slithering back. "No." She opened the door. Carter froze, horror crawling across his face. From the molten pit, a single hand emerged, glowing faintly, its veins pulsing with unnatural light. The cycle wasn't broken. It had only begun.